All right, so we've just finished kind of talking through sensation, which really focuses at the receptor level, but now we're kind of transitioning to reception, exploring how our brain processes stimuli that is provided by afferent neurons. So let's first take a look at bottom-up and top-down processing. So bottom-up processing is where sensory stimuli is used to process information. And so I put an example here at the bottom, or a couple of examples. So for example, right, if there is an unfamiliar language that you're exposed to, then you try to process some of those sounds before you find any meaning, right? Same thing if you're seeing an unknown object, right? You try to understand its shape, form, and texture, and color before you try and piece together what the object is. Okay, so essentially we're working bottom up, right? You're taking all of the sensory information, and then you are going to somehow make some sort of decision or conclusion on what it is, right, or what you're hearing, etc. The top-down processing is when you utilize your previous knowledge and experiences to perceive new experiences. And so with top-down processing, right, you already have a lot of knowledge, right, prior knowledge, and you are applying this to new experiences. So for example, you're reading messy handwriting, right, you can probably still understand some of the words, the meaning of the sentence through what you already know based off of the context, right? Or perhaps if you are trying to understand a spoken sentence in a noisy room, right? Well, there might be instances where we're not hearing every single word that's being said in that sentence, right? But you're still able to fill in the gaps based off of what you know about English, right? Even if, there's some prepositions that you didn't hear, right? Or conjunctions that you kind of missed, you can still probably piece together the overall meaning of what that person was saying in the noisy room. So now let's take a look at Gestalt principles. And it's important that we recognize all six of these principles. So similarity refers to how similar objects are grouped together. So we can see how with this image here, we have triangles, right? Two columns of triangles. And so those triangles, we recognize them, right? Because they're similar. There's three, essentially three sides. And so we kind of want to group those together. And then we have those circles that are in between. It's kind of like a sandwich. Prognons is a reality organized reduced to simplest form possible. And so we see that here, we see this as five circles, right? Instead of, okay, I have a larger circumference here, I have two smaller circumferences here. So I have like maybe an oval, some sore, and then I have another oval here. And then, so that's just too much, right? Instead, our brain wants to seek out simplicity. And so we just think about it as five circles that are grouped together. Proximity refers to how objects that are close together are grouped together. And so we see how here, right, we view this kind of like four pairs of chopsticks or lines, right? So they're grouped together. Continuity refers to how lines are seen as following the smoothest path. So you want to view the lines like this, right? Instead of like this, where it's not smooth and you're trying to take turns, right? And it can also refer to if the lines are disconnected, right? We can see continuity that way. Closure refers to how objects grouped together are seen as a whole. So you can see this, right? We just usually view these kind of like squares, right? Although we do have like brackets on either side, right? Our brain tries to perceive these brackets or translate these brackets into square-like objects. And then common fate refers to objects moving in the same direction will be considered a unit. So we consider this as a whole. We can, like a flock of birds flying in that direction, right? Because we are trying to group them as whole. So a useful mnemonic would be some people prefer clean crisp cookies, right? So sum, similarity, P prognods, the other P proximity, to C stands for continuity and closure, and the last C stands for common fate. And you don't have to memorize in this order, but just try and find some way that you can know that these are the six major Gestalt principles. There's some others out there, but these are the six major ones we want to know. And you can, on the MCAT, they can show you some other visual representation of this and expects you to recognize what type of principle this is referring to, or what this means in different contexts. Now let's look at perceptual organization. So how do we tell when objects are closer or further away? Well, first I have monocular cues. So that means that these really depend only on one eye. We only need one eye to view this. So there's 8 monocular cues that we need to know. First, we have relative size. So this assumes that two objects are similar in size. We perceive that the one that casts the smaller retinal image as further away, right? So if you have two soda cans of the same height, right? Then that means that if you place one closer to you and one further away from you, the one that's smaller is the one that's further away, right? That's pretty straightforward. Interposition is when one object partially blocks our view of another, we perceive it as closer. So think about how objects are positioned relative to each other. So see here, based off this image here, which shows interposition? Well, it's this one here, right? We can see how there's these three shapes. We can see how this circle is closer than the square is the second closest, and then the triangle is the furthest away. Relative clarity is how hazy objects, how we perceive hazy objects as further away than sharp objects, right? So this is especially true if you have bad eyesight and you see, oh, I can see this more clearly than that, right? And so for that object, the word that I can't see is further away from me, okay? Texture gradient refers to a gradual change from a coarse, distinct texture to a fine, indistinct texture, and how this signals increasing distance, right? So you can kind of see this here, right? And and then further and further away, it becomes more indistinct, right? Okay. Now let's take a look at four more. So we also have relative height. So this is how we perceive objects higher in their field of vision as being further away. So if you have two trees, right? And so if we see a tree that is higher in our field of vision, then we see that as being further away. Relative motion refers to how objects closer to a visual field appear to move quicker. Okay, so this can be if you're on a train or on a plane. Linear perspective refers to how parallel lines appear to converge with distance. The more the lines converge, the greater the perceived distance. You can also see this here as well, right? We can see this with railways, okay? And lastly, light and shadow. So given, two identical objects, the dimmer one seems further away, okay? And closer one is not going to be as dim, right? And we can kind of see this here. It's not the best representation, but we should have two objects here, but we can see how maybe a part of objects will look closer than the other part near the back, right? So that's how we want kind of perceive stuff like that. Now let's take a look at the binocular cues. So these require two eyes. So retinal disparity refers to the visual difference between the visual angles due to the position which the eyes perceive the image, right? So, if you block one of your eyes, then take a look at what's in front of you, and then block the other eye and take a look at what's in front of you, right? Your field of vision will be a little different, right? And that's due to how your neurons, right, process information because their field of vision is different. We also have convergence, and so this estimates how much the eye is turned inward to determine the distance from the face, of the object from the face. So if you see this here, right, in this case, the object is further away, so our eyes don't need to be turned as much. But here, with beta here, the object is much closer, so our eyes need to turn at a much greater angle, right? Okay, so those are our monocular cues. and our 8 monocular cues and 2 binocular cues. Okay. Oops, let me go back here in just a moment. So there we go. That's what we need to know for perceptual organization. Make sure you review through this information, and I'll see everyone in the next video.